Okay, I'm Alex Evans. I'm the head of the Global Risks Program at New York University's Center on International Cooperation. As we think about the 30 to 40 year outlook on environmental and other major global issues, I think it's really important to think about the narrative, the stories that we tell as we look over that timescale. At the moment, there's a lot of voices who look at the future and just have a very gloomy perspective, say that, we're looking at a long-term outlook of decline. That's an unhelpful narrative because it doesn't tell us what to do about it. There's another narrative that does the rounds, which is that the outlook is gloomy if we do nothing, but that all we have to do is very minor actions, like not leave our televisions on standby or switch to energy-efficient light bulbs. And I think this is an unhelpful narrative too, because it offers solutions that aren't actually consistent with the scale of the problem described by the same narrative. And people aren't stupid. They can see that a narrative about the decline of civilization that only talks about very tiny shifts in lifestyle doesn't actually add up. It doesn't make sense. So what might a better narrative for the next 40 years look like? I think it would emphasize 4 points in particular. The first is it would talk about huge kind of tectonic stresses, as Thomas Homer Dixon puts it. He's a professor at the University of Toronto. They're kind of really big things happening beneath the surface that are going to kind of change the context for civilization over the next 40 years. And some of those tectonic stresses would be climate change, of course, a world of increasing energy scarcity, a world in which food security is becoming more of a pressing concern, and a world in which global inequality is becoming a bigger deal over time. So that's the first element, these kind of tectonic shifts. The second thing that such a narrative might stress is the question of resilience. We're going to see shocks of one kind or another over the next 40 years. Even just in the last 10, we've seen financial crashes, we've seen terrorist attacks, we've seen concerns over weapons of mass destruction. We can expect to see more of these kinds of shocks over the coming decades. So the question of what makes individuals, communities, political systems, all kinds of systems, resilient to these shocks is going to become a big deal. The third element to a narrative about the next 40 years, looking at these global risks, is going to be using crisis creatively to push for plans that can actually prevent crises as well as just respond to them. The economist Milton Friedman has a lovely quote where he says, what happens in a crisis all depends on the ideas that are lying around. It's very easy to just go back to what was happening before, but if there's a plan for what we'll do in the crisis, then what was politically inconceivable becomes politically inevitable more or less overnight. So knowing what we're going to do to respond to crisis, what plans we want to push for when that political space opens up, is really important. Last but not least, it's going to be really important also to have voices out there talking about a positive long-term vision. As shocks increase and as damages from these trends like environmental degradation or energy scarcity stack up more, there's going to be no shortage of voices in public debate with very fearful messages, proposing knee-jerk policy responses. So there'll be a real premium on people who can say, yes, we're going through a period of turbulence, yes, it's difficult, and we mustn't underestimate or understate the seriousness of the situation. But if we can get through this, if we can stay together, manage this problem as we're going through it, the long-term outlook is very positive. And I absolutely believe that to be the case. We have the technologies, we know what the political outcomes look like, and in 40 years we could see much more cohesive communities with a much better quality of life than exists in a lot of parts of the world today, if we can keep our nerve through the coming period of turbulence.